Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast, hosted by Clark and Laura, where bad ideas go to die and good ideas seem like great ideas. How are you doing, Laura?
Doing good, Clark.
So, I hear you want to start a ministry. What are you thinking about? Tell me all about it.
I just really want to help people, Clark.
I know, isn't that great?
Yeah.
All right.
So that's my idea.
All right. This is not a bad thing. This is something we all do. I do it a lot with businesses. Like my wife and I used to watch The Prophet and Shark Tank and things like this. We come up with all these ideas. And sometimes I got to the point I was writing up business plans and you never do them, right?
Yeah.
Same thing happens with ministry, but sometimes you do them. Simple House is an example of that. All right. So the title of this episode is, So You Want to Start a Ministry. And we're going to go over some real basic things. We're also going to answer the enigma question of should you give $5 to the guy who's standing at the side of the road with a sign? The reason why we're going to answer that question, and we're not even going to tell you when we answer that question, is I find that whenever I talk about ministry and say very interesting, insightful ideas, no one cares. They just care. Should they give $5 to the guy standing on the side of the road? And so if that comes up during the talk, it's like the rest of the talk's forgotten and all energy gets focused on that. We'll address it during this episode, but we're not going to tell you when. All right. Anything new with you, Laura Heeman?
Not really, Clark Massey.
Since our last episode, Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon have been let go. And there's something that Star Wars teaches us that's actually a deeply Christian concept. In the original Star Wars movie, Obi-Wan has a fight with Darth Vader. And in this fight, Obi-Wan tells Vader, if you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And Jesus could have told this to Pontius Pilate, but Jesus doesn't act like that, so he didn't. And at the end of this fight with Darth Vader, Obi-Wan relaxes his lightsaber and deliberately kind of allows Vader to strike him down. And then in Star Wars universe, Obi-Wan Kenobi joins the communion of Star Wars saints and starts guiding people through the communion of saints. This is kind of the Catholicism of Star Wars, right? And it turns out when I tried to look up this clip is replayed in many later Star Wars movies. There's a very similar idea, like if you strike me down, I will become more powerful. Mm-hmm. All right. I think there's an interesting corollary with this with kind of cancellation culture. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a sense in which if you're canceled for doing something that's true and good, you come back more powerful, and it's actually your enemies are building the very cause they're trying to destroy.
Yeah. It's like if you think of different college professors that have been canceled for something that they stood up for on their campus. I didn't know any of their names before. Right. I didn't know what field they were in.
Instead of speaking to 30 people at a time, they're speaking to 100,000 people at a time now.
Yeah. Right? I'm reading the op-ed they wrote about being canceled now and finding it interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually think that Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson are going to come out okay on this. I think Don Lemon's going to end up on The View. And if they, I know The View doesn't have male men on it, but there's going to be some version of The View that has Don Lemon on it. And Tucker, though, I think if he just goes independent, is going to have a way larger audience than cable news can allow.
Yeah. My impression is that Don Lemon will just keep doing the same thing Don Lemon's been doing.
Right. Which feels like The View. Am I right on that?
Yeah. And I feel like there's parts of Tucker Carlson that I find grating, and that's his cable news personality, and then parts that I find satisfying. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Yeah.
He's not going to be trapped into having to do a monologue each night, which always has to become a rant because that's just what daily monologues have to be.
Yeah.
But when you picture Tucker Carlson in your mind, by the way, I don't think Laura and I, either of us are 100% endorsers of Tucker Carlson, but I do think though that his getting fired is going to give him a better voice to correct culture than before. When you picture him in your mind's eye, is he wearing a bow tie or a regular tie?
Bow tie.
I know. I don't think he's worn that bow tie for well over a decade.
Huh.
I think he should go back to the bow tie because it's so symbolic.
Yeah, it is interesting, like with like Jon Stewart and Bill Maher doing independent stuff are a lot more interesting to me now, even though, I agree.
So some things happening IRL is Laura's family is going to come to Kansas City and stay with my wife and I, and we're going to have the Simplehouse anniversary in Kansas City. Also, just today, this NFL drafts here in Kansas City, which is kind of cool because there's all this like pageantry where it's like all these people wearing these bright colors to support their team are walking around, and they're not antagonizing each other. They're both here just to enjoy the draft because there's no actual game happening, which is kind of a nice vibe in the city right now. So, Laura, I heard a new philosophy on when we have these young missionaries at Simplehouse and they describe what they're looking for in a man. You know, like you want a man who's got like God at the center of his life. He's very focused on pleasing you. He's very kind and nice. But you know what? You know what, Laura?
Tell me, Clark.
That's not your man. That's the Chick-fil-A worker. Keep the line moving. I did not write that joke. That's a stolen material. All right. Simplehouse has a new devotion that Laura doesn't know about. We're now devoted to St. Andrew at the Kansas City house.
All right.
Not just any St. Andrew, St. Andrew Kim.
Wait, is anything named after him, or what's the devotion looking like?
Well, I'll tell you how it came about, and then I want you to I'm going to give you a multiple choice quiz on why we have this devotion. Okay.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So Margot and I found online this like amazing painting, right, at an estate sale. And it was amazing because it just was like of a really great quality. Like so much kind of Catholic stuff is not of great quality. But then also, besides it being great quality, this person who was from the Far East, who was dressed very as if he was from the Far East, but also dressed as a Catholic priest. And we were like, wow, we don't even know what that is. It looks Japanese, but we got to go get that, right? So Margot goes to an estate sale and she calls me and she says, it looks great, but there's a problem. Or she goes, but I'm surprised by something. And I go, what? She goes, it's very large. She ends up getting it. And it's St. Andrew Kim. We now have a 5-foot tall painting of St. Andrew Kim.
Wow.
All right. So it gets put at Simplehouse, and we don't tell any of the missionaries there, but it's leaned up against the wall at Simplehouse. And it turns out this is the year we have our very first Korean missionary. So he sees it and he's taken aback. He knows exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And he's worried that we're doing this for him as like diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
All right. So here's your quiz. How does Simplehouse get new devotions? Do we get new devotions because we find deals at estate sales? Do we get new devotions because diversity,
equity, and inclusion?
Or do we get new devotions because Andrew? So this is a Father Adam-ism that we've said before, is that Father Adam spoke very eloquently to a group of people and mentioned St. Teresa's little flower. And at the end, a group came up and they were like, Father, will you come to our retreat? The retreat's on St. Teresa's little flower, and it seems like you have a great devotion to her. And he turns to them and he says, I do not have a great devotion to St. Teresa's little flower. She has a great devotion to me. So, or did Father Andrew Kim find us? And that's why we have a devotion to St. Andrew Kim. I'm
going to go with C.
C. I believe that C is true also. So Father Andrew Kim is a Korean martyr. He is the first Korean Catholic priest. And his dad was a martyr also. So his dad was a martyr. He became a priest and then he became a martyr also. It's kind of a sad, but like kind of deep story. So a great missionary priest we now have a devotion to.
There's a St. Andrew Kim Catholic Church in Maryland.
Really? Yeah. I noticed there was a Korean Catholic church here in Kansas City too. Yeah. So that's interesting. I did discover something else this week.
Okay.
Before we get into the meat of our podcast on you wanting to start a ministry, I believe that public education created Lucky Charms. They might have created Cocoa Puffs also.
Enabled.
Right. If you're going to keep your kids at home all day and you're a homeschooler, you would never feed your kid Lucky Charms. It requires you to want to drive your kids somewhere else right after you feed it to them.
Yeah.
Or kick them out of the house.
If you leave your kids somewhere else right after they eat Lucky Charms, you can be ignorant to two facts. One is that they're unhappy on Lucky Charms, and two, that they're hungry a half hour later after eating Lucky Charms.
I feel so bad that we give all our kids these chocolate bunnies, and like I won't let them eat them like all the day of, right? Just let them OD on sugar, right? But like if I feed my kids a chocolate bunny and then they go outside and play, within 20 minutes, one of them will be sobbing uncontrollably.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, this is just not worth it. But I can't also tell you can't have your chocolate bunnies.
Yeah, when it's like candy season for any reason, it's like every year we have a different approach. Some years we're like, we're going to spread this out, eat one piece after a meal. And other years I'm like, eat it all this week. And I never want to see it again.
We'll just go through our pain
like
right
we're
now.
going to have a horrible week. And this is, I think, a bad cultural development. And if you are a person that gives out Halloween candy, let it be known that I think this. During COVID, people wanted to do more socially distant Halloween giving. So they did all these like little gift bags of candy that could be sort of more, less germy or something. And now the kids get like triple the amount of candy than pre-COVID because they get all these like very generous little gift bags instead of 1 or 2 pieces.
Are you like me and only give out toothpaste on Halloween?
I try to be, last year we gave out like fruit leather and I heard both negative and positive reviews.
What they did on my neighborhood for Halloween during COVID, and they have not, and they're still doing it, they haven't quit, is some of the houses would take a PVC pipe, zip tie it to the railing and shoot you candy out the other end.
Yeah. I think some people just found that as fun and kept it for that factor, not for the germ factor. But,
okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about starting a ministry. This is going to be a very basic reflection, but if you don't do the basic reflection, all your ideas will come to nothing, I think. I also think there's a couple people here in Kansas City. Each of them has started multiple ministries successfully, and they've been able to leave those ministries, and those ministries continue to function. And they have kind of a different attitude towards it than me, but I think their attitude both might be better, and it's kind of amazing what they've achieved. Yeah. Like to me, like when people tell me ministry ideas, I kind of look at them and I'm like, are you ready to die for this? Or are you ready to give up just years for this? And if I think no, then I think this is just a mental exercise. Yeah. But these people I'm talking about, I mean, they really did these ministries. They didn't martyr themselves to them, and they worked. So I'm trying to get them on the podcast. I won't out them yet and try to save some of that material. So the most basic thing is, what does it mean to give a gift? To be charitable or to be ministerial. And there's kind of 3 parts that are kind of the beauty of a gift. The first part, this is going to sound so basic that it's just completely dumb, but I think if you see that this reality is denied, you'll see the importance of labeling these things. One is sacrifice, right? Almost like the Old Testament idea of like, are you willing to give a burnt offering? Like, are you willing to just give something up meaningfully that you have to dig deep for? That is a beautiful part of charity. Yeah. The second is actually the relationship and the loving interaction, right? That it can form between 2 people. And that's part of the witness of it too, right? And then the third part is, are you actually helping anyone? Like, are you actually alleviating a material concern? The reason why this seemed important for us to think through at the beginning of Simple House was like, if you look at the way so many people are being helped, like by just a government program, they've only honored that third point. There's no relationship. There's no sacrifice, because it's just kind of taken in taxes or taken through debt spending or what. Yeah. And at best, they're hoping to just hit number 3, material help. Right. Yeah. And they are often failing at that. Yeah. So it's like, don't ever start a ministry that's not capturing all 3 is my first point, because you need to be at least making some progress on all three, or you'll end up with only having one and you'll half fail at that, and you're really not doing something worthwhile. I also think that the reverse of this is true, where you'll meet people all the time. This kind of has to do with the $5 at the side of the road question, where people are like, well, I gave it to them and it doesn't matter what they use it for, or it's not on me if they waste it. It's not on me if it has any material help to them, or if it's feeding an addiction. It's that I gave it well. Yeah. Right. And they even have saint quotes to back this up. And these things are so annoying to me. Yeah. If you are setting out to do something where you don't even care what the result is, just stop now. Yeah. And there's this other thing we do that if you're around these type of discernment meetings, you'll see it over and over again, where they won't have a serious concern whether or not they're actually creating material help. They'll tell a story. Yeah. Instead of looking at any data, they'll just be like, and then I'm sure that even though they did this, I'm sure that it helped their spirit and their soul and their blah, blah, blah. And it's like, why are you so sure? Yeah. Maybe it didn't. Yeah. Yeah. Like, what does the sacrifice mean? Because it's like, you could spare to give $100, right? And you give $100 and that can be a nice gift, even if it didn't, hurt you that much. But having to wrestle with it, or the discernment aspect of it, could play into the sacrifice, because that's actually time and energy. Yeah. And might be more difficult for a lot of people than parting with $100 or $50 or 20 or 1,000, whatever it is, right. Yeah. The material sacrifice that you're making is not as important as the time sacrifice. Even sometimes, like, making room for this additional relationship. This relationship with someone who's not like you, who's maybe uncouth, or has big problems, or smells bad, or whatever, right? Or who's embarrassing to be seen with. Yeah. This is a beautiful part of this that Christians need to be embracing. Like, I think there are times when we do material sacrifices, and that's like an important part too. Not to throw that out the window, but yeah. Well, I do think our main point, though, is that you're trying to have all three, Yeah. Well, no. You're saying all the sacrifices. Not all the sacrifice has to be like more ambiguous discernment, time, relation, right. Whatever. Yeah. Right. The other thing that is a really important point that you only are going to learn after doing quite a bit of ministry is that, like, if you don't care whether or not you're actually materially helping the person, you're also going to fail on the second point, the relationship. Yeah. Because, like, when someone who's an addict or someone who has problems gets something from you and they use it for a bad end, they will actually view you negatively. Yeah. Right. When an addict uses someone, even if it's their parent, and uses them to, like, promote their addiction, it actually creates animosity in that person towards the giver. Yeah, it's like actually you've given this person poison, because now every time they see you, they have this temptation to treat you one way, even if they have higher intentions. Like, not giving into that temptation is like I think the idea of, like, you've actually hurt them through the gift is an important aspect, but the other aspect is it's like the con man. Does the con man respect the mark? No. And never. And when this person actually does want to get better, they will not go to the people who've been enabling them. Yep. Right. So if the Catholic Church or your church or you are, like, helping the poor in a way that actually is just not helpful, when the poor actually want to get their life together, they're not coming to your church. They're not coming to you to get their life together, because they know that you don't care about that based on your actions. You're the mark of this relationship. So, this whole enabling thing becomes destructive, though, because, like, if you're so worried about enabling people, you won't end up giving anything to anyone, because it can always be taken badly. But you do have to worry about it. One of the rules, like at Simple House, is we'll always feed you. We won't even ask. We'll just feed you. Yeah, we're not gonna. Yeah, right. Yeah, but we're feeding you to talk to you. Yes. And similarly, we're not going to feel bad about giving, an 8 months pregnant woman, like, a pack and play, Right. Like, there's, like, a good is being done there, it's just. Well, I guess the corollary, though, would be, like, there are. Does she sell the pack and play? Exactly. And that will shock people. But, like, when you're giving, like, all of these gifts on Christmas, there's a lot of families that turn around with those gifts and sell them, right?
Yeah.
And that's bad, right?
Yeah.
Now, having said that, if it's a new expectant mother and you give her a gift and she turns around and sells it, you kind of, at some level, we have to just say sorry.
Yeah.
But what I see a lot is people who just don't even want to consider it. They're like, well, if they sell it, it's on them, not on me. And it's like,
yeah, sure.
Actually, okay, it's on them, but you're actually just wasting your whole charitable sacrifice, and there's no good. You're just ruining the relationship aspect and the material help aspect, and there's just something crooked in it.
Yeah. Well, another rule that we have at a Simple House is, like we don't give help that we don't feel comfortable with, and it's like we have to help our missionaries recognize when there's this doesn't feel good,
That's a sign of manipulation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like having good boundaries to the amount of help you're going to give is a very important part. There was a guy who I knew. I'm sure he's still alive, or I hope he is. He's out in DC. His name's David Coates. And before Simple House, I would go every Sunday morning and, wash dishes at this place that was like a medical homeless shelter. And he was the cook. And he'd become the kind of cook at this medical homeless shelter after having been the cook at a country club. And so to me, this man was just the best. Right. Yeah. And he had a really great story. I idealized him so much. He told me about his family. He was an African-American guy. And he was going to church all the time. Great guy. But I didn't realize he had this very interesting past, having gone to prison and everything, and ended up here. That was interesting. But the other thing he did is he told me what he thought the keys were to good ministry. And he only told me this after I begged him to tell me what he thought the keys were. And he said, you have to be very comfortable on what you can give and know what you won't give. You have to not do everything for the person. And they need to know that you're going to be their friend even when they fail. Yeah, And those are just great guiding concepts. And the fact that he said that off the cuff was just great. Yeah. But I think this next point with solidarity, subsidiarity has a lot to do with that relationship component and what David Coates said. Solidarity is this idea that we are all cut from the same cloth. Yeah. That there aren't really types of people in a sense that we're all from the same cloth as Mother Teresa and Hitler. Yeah. Yeah. And when we meet a poor person, they're our true peer. Yeah. No matter how ugly, dumb, sinful, whatever, they're our true peer, right? In God and everything like that. I sometimes think of it as if you step back to where God is and you look down on us, these little differences of virtue between us just don't look that big. Yeah. It'd be like God looking at who's stronger physically. It's well, none of us are that darn strong to begin with. So compared to God, so there's a sense of solidarity where you have to just say, I am the same as you and I am with you and I am shoulder to shoulder with you. Right. And it's not pity. Right. Right. One thing we want to find out in interviews when we're, talking to people that are interested in coming to volunteer at a Simple House is have you had a moment of humiliation that made you turn to God, and it's worrisome when people can't articulate that, and I think another thing is we get a lot of people who are really talented and great and wonderful. And it's sometimes breaking out of the success, which is kind of the college, high school model, is hard. And you want people to have that there, but before the grace of God go I, And I think that this solidarity is kind of this idea that you're sometimes meeting someone whose life's kind of a wreck or in a hole or mentally ill, right? And you almost have to be willing to jump down into that hole with them. Yeah. And that doesn't mean crying with them. And I really am afraid of empathy and sympathy. I'm all for respect, meaning I want to come down here and talk to you about it. And usually people even want to sort out their problems with you, know, because if they feel like you're really there to listen and things like that. But the listening's not about crying with them. The listening is about receiving what they have to show you and teach you and respecting them and also even just helping them sort it. Yeah. Which is an incredible act of evangelization if you're helping them sort it in a way that's more God-centered.
Just ordered. Like,
ordered's part of it, but understanding, I mean, I thought Jordan Peterson's like, is it the 10 rules for life or something like that? It's like the 10 commandments are like the 10 rules for life. You know what I mean? And it's like, if they're going to get out of this, you kind of have to show them how to get out of this. You know, certain things always end in destruction and a wreck, and you have to kind of help them like figure that part out, That is what solidarity is. And I always struggle not to say solidarity and subsidiarity are like the yin and the yang, because I hate balance. I always like extremism. But like subsidiarity is this idea that like they have to do it for themselves. Mm-hmm. You can make it easier. You can encourage them, but they've got to be the actor. And subsidiarity, technically speaking, is the lowest form that can take the responsibility in the action needs to, right? And you can give examples of that. Like if you're raising your child, like maybe you're brushing their teeth when they're 2, but when they're 4, if they're not brushing their teeth and you're still brushing their teeth, you're actually hurting them by helping them. Right. So solidarity is this idea that you need to help them along, but subsidiarity is this idea that they have to be the primary one who does it. Yeah.
I guess a reason why is because it's like you are closer to the solution there anyway. Like it's like the family has a problem, can see the problem better than like the government or something, so they're like.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why this is true. It's partly about actually respecting them. I mean, but it's also an information problem. Like one of the things at Simple House we teach people to do is like when you ask someone what their problem is, you then ask them what their solution is. And most of the time their solution's the right solution and they know more about it and have thought more about it than you. But sometimes it's not. And then you have to kind of go from there. Often what we'll do is we'll try their solution. And if it fails, we'll suggest a solution. But you almost have to, just out of respect, try the way they think they'll fix their problem first. But this subsidiarity thing, what I love about it is in the Catechism and the social doctrine, it's called a law. And that's so interesting to me, that term, because it's not a law like the 10 Commandments. And it's not a law like the U.S. government. And it's not a canon law. It's like this other type of law. And the closest thing I have is like the law of supply and demand. Like, why do economists call that a law? It's a law because you can set prices. You can break the law of supply and demand. And if you do, you're just fighting the tide. And if you break the law of subsidiarity, you will do no good. And it happens time and time and time again, that if you try to do it for them, it will come to nothing, because it's like you're breaking one of the laws of the universe. It's not a law like gravity that you can never break. It's a law that you can break, but it will always fail. Apart
from like it being effective, then there's also like another reason that when you take over things for people that they could be doing, it's like they lose their ability to do the things that they should be doing, and that's like with the families that we help, but it's also like even in like our volunteer communities, if we need our directors to delegate, and when they don't, they get asked questions about how to do every single thing. And it's annoying,
It's a failure.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not the failure, maybe partly on the question asker, but it's a bigger failure on the other end.
Right. Well, I find that this breaking the law of subsidiarity is a two-way street. People do want you to do it for them. Right. Like it's a temptation of both the giver and the receiver. And they both have to get that right.
Right. There's like a thing in parenting where sometimes it's like if you do something for your kid, it will be easier at that particular moment, but you can't do it because you don't want your kid to think you're gonna hold them every time you're crossing the street or whatever, like, I mean, sometimes I do hold the kids when I'm crossing the street, but it's like you do the thing once and then the kid thinks I don't have to do this because mom will do it.
Yeah. I have a daughter with some developmental disabilities, and like we find out in parent teacher conferences that the school's getting her to do more than we get her to do at home. I think this is probably true of a lot of kids, even regardless, but it's like, ooh, wake up call. This kid's more capable than I thought,
Yeah. I think that's probably true for a lot of people, right? Yeah.
Right. That's probably true of all kids.
Yeah.
Man, I had this moment in my childhood where like I was going to church with my mom and I would be allowed to bring like a Matchbox car or a coloring book or something like this. Right. And one time my grandma came with us and my grandma looked at my mom and was like, why is he allowed to do that?
Yeah.
And my mom said, well, he's just a kid. He doesn't know what's happening or he can't pay attention. And my grandma goes, oh, yes, he can. And I remember as a child being like, busted, like busted. Like I was hiding my capabilities there.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
So let's talk about the guy at the side of the road. All right. Let me set a little bit of a backdrop. Like a lot of people are running into the person on the sidewalk, the person at the interstate, the person with a little sign. And it does say in the Bible, give to all those who ask. And I know that, you know, you can symbolically like satisfy that some way, but like, how are you actually going to give to these people? Right. And is it a good idea? Now, taking a step back, one thing to know about like American homelessness is it's almost never economic. We kind of went over this before, in that poverty is a mystery that's not really a mystery of opportunity and resources. It's a different thing, you know? So some of the people who are begging for money, a lot of them are drug addicts. A lot of them have mental illness, and some of them are grifters or running from the law. Okay.
Yeah.
And those are the three primary reasons for homelessness, and they can overlap, right?
Yeah.
The grifters are the ones who literally have a hustle, who may have a place they're going every night, sleeping with family or friends or even their own place, but they understand how to get money from people. You know, I think I have a lot of stories of this. I don't even know if it's worth sharing the stories, you know? And I even still am surprised sometimes by this, right? I saw a guy who was missing a leg and just was the dirtiest guy I'd ever seen at the side of the road. And I made a mental note that I'd seen him there twice. I was going to go do outreach with him. And then I show up at Costco and he's at Costco shopping and appears to personally know everyone who works at Costco. But anyway, but whatever, those stories are a dime a dozen, right? But like, that's like an example of grift, right? But then there's also the addiction, you know? And if you give money in that situation, you know what you're giving money to, right? And then the third thing is the mental illness. And I've actually found, like, I once had a situation even before Simple House where I found a guy digging through the trash for food, and I took a $20 bill out and I tried to give him $20, and he was horrified and kind of scared me and wouldn't take the 20, even though he was digging through the trash for food. Yeah. Right. That's like the type of severe mental illness that is now on just the streets of America. Right. Yeah. So what you're not finding is just someone who got laid off.
You will find someone that will tell you that's why they're on the street.
Exactly.
Just to be clear.
Yes, that's right. And you have to know them for a while before you can sometimes discern the real reason. Yeah. But there's a lot of couches you can land on before you're on the street. And there's also shelters that are very willing to take you in. And if they see that you're not on drugs and have potential and could get a job, they will put extra resources in you. They will run to you to do that. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like when a donor comes up and says, hey, can you show me someone who's really hardworking, who wants to get out of poverty? I would like to help them. I'm like, wouldn't we all? Yeah. You know, I mean, like the charitable workers themselves are running to those people. Yeah. You know, to provide them resources. Yeah. So the problem is just harder than all this, right? And so all the different solutions you hear, like, well, I give him $5 and that's on him, or I take him out to eat, or I only give sandwiches. None of these are real solutions. You know, I think the only thing that approaches being a real solution is something that that everyone's going to find unsatisfactory, but it's actually to repeatedly go to the same person and form relationship. And you probably have to be eating with them and taking them out to coffee and doing things like this. And it takes a weirdly large amount of time, you know, like a couple times a week in order to do something like this. And you may actually be able to help that person. And that's kind of why Simple House missionaries do what they do. That's their approach. And we have the time to do it. Because it almost takes a full-time job to figure something like that out. But I do think like if you're working downtown, if you just pick one person that you're going to kind of go deep with, that's a better strategy than giving $5 to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a thing that people want a rule and there's just like not a rule, you know, as a default. I generally don't give money to people on the side of the road, but there's been times where it's like, my heart's been broken by this particular person a little bit, you know, and I just am going to give them the $5, you know, and I think it's like, if you have too much of a rule, it's like the Holy Spirit can't work, you know, and you're actually like, it's a way of avoiding the people that are in front of you, you know, like if you're just like, I can apply one rule to all of you people that I'm going to see. I don't know. So I don't like trying to help people like formulate a rule, you know,
yeah,
which is a thing people want, you know?
Yeah. That's the problem is that like, there's all these things we need to talk about with ministry, but the ministry question that they're continually confronted with is, what do you do with this guy?
Yeah.
And so they don't want to listen to the rest of the talk. That's the only thing they want. And they want a rule so they can feel good about it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a way of actually like not engaging.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of torn in the sense of like, I think everyone needs to be doing some ministry and getting to know the poor and making real friends with the poor.
Yeah.
And this question of how do you deal with someone you're driving past or who approached you in a parking lot is actually not that. You know?
Yeah. Like if you work on K Street, you're going to see some of the same people every single day, you know? And I like what you're saying. It's like, you could choose like one guy, you know, and say, I'm going to take you out to coffee every week or two or something, you know? But it's like I almost feel like we need to give people permission to say like you're on vacation with your family in Washington, D.C. right now. You're supposed to be paying attention to your kids, you know, like you don't have to. This might not be the person that God is, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think, though, that the people, when you get most bothered by this is when there's nothing else in your life you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so deeply involve yourself in some form of ministry and then don't feel bad if you're not giving to this guy. But if you're not doing any other ministry, like that's why I never say don't give, because it's like, a lot of these people aren't giving to anyone. And then it's like, well, you maybe give to the guy on the side of the road, because if that's the only thing you're doing, maybe I don't want to discourage that, you know, but the real answer is not that. The real answer is to do more meaningful ministry and then don't worry as much about your interaction with the guy on the side of the road.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Laura, give us a Shazam exit.
Good to talk to you, Clark.
It's always a pleasure, Laura.
See you soon. Please like, subscribe, and the other thing, our podcast.
Laura really means it, even though that sounded painful.
What was the other thing? Share.
Consider donating to Simple House.
Yeah.
This is the lamest outro we've ever had. All right. God bless. Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Peace out. Bye.
Bye.